Stars and Stripes and a Love Unseen by Sabrina Mendez. Chapter 1. The Call of History. In the cacophony of New York City, where horns blared and sirens echoed through the concrete canyons, Mia Thompson found her sanctuary within the hushed corridors of the National Heritage Museum. The scent of old parchment and ink lingered in the air, a comforting aroma that wrapped around her like an embrace. Her fingertips ran over the textured edges of historical documents, tracing the inked words that told stories of triumph, struggle, and the American dream.
Mia's love for the United States was not just academic. It was embedded in her very being, a legacy passed down by her ancestors. Her great-grandmother, Evelyn Thompson, had arrived on the shores of Ellis Island from Ireland in the early 1900s, her eyes wide with hope and determination. Evelyn's mysterious wartime romance with a soldier during World War II had always been a tantalizing family secret, one Mia was determined to unravel, a secret that, if uncovered, could reshape her understanding of love, sacrifice, and the immigrant experience.
Within the quietude of the archive room, Mia gently pulled out an aged, yellowed envelope marked 1943 from the personal effects of her late grandmother Rose. The letters, penned in an elegant cursive that spoke of a different era, whispered tales left untold, clandestine rendezvous, declarations of love, and a promise to return. Yet, as she read deeper, something in the letters hinted at a greater mystery, a hidden truth about her great-grandmother's wartime lover, one that had been buried for decades.
"Who were you, mystery soldier?"
Mia murmured to herself, staring at the singular photograph of her great-grandmother, a beau in uniform by her side, his face partially obscured by shadow. The clue left her craving more, and her curiosity ignited a determination to uncover the truth. Sitting at her cluttered wooden desk, Mia spread out a map of the United States, its vibrant colors muted by the years. The nation sprawled before her, a tapestry of tales waiting to be unearthed. She traced a route with her finger, from New York to Pennsylvania, to the deep South, and across the expansive Midwest, each destination a potential key to unlocking the story of love lost to time. That afternoon, Mia decided to begin her quest in a city that pulsed with a rhythm reminiscent of America's heartbeat. With letters in hand, she would travel west to Philadelphia, once the nation's capital, and a city deeply entwined with America's birth. She would seek out historians, war veterans, and anyone who might recognize the uniform in the photograph. Her research was punctuated by the soft whir of the museum's lone ceiling fan, blending with the distant rumble of the city that never truly slept. The mere thought of retracing her great-grandmother's steps filled Mia with renewed zeal. It was more than just an adventure. It was an opportunity to honor the woman whose resilience flowed through her veins. Eager to share this new chapter with someone, Mia glanced at the dimly lit office occupied by her colleague and friend, Margaret Bennett. Margaret was a wellspring of wisdom and, most importantly, a staunch believer in unfurling history's lesser-known tales. Her bespectacled eyes twinkled with curiosity as Mia explained her plan.
"You've always had a flair for uncovering the unexplored,"
Margaret said, her voice intertwining encouragement with a hint of skepticism. She leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking under her.
"But you'll need more than just letters and a photograph. Have you considered seeking out other historians?"
The suggestion was sound, yet Mia had reservations. She remembered Ethan Cole, a name that loomed within historical circles. His critically acclaimed yet profoundly enigmatic work on World War II had earned him both respect and seclusion. Rumor had it, Ethan retreated from public life after unearthing a family scandal. The chance that he might hold insights into her own family mystery was enticing, but she also knew there was another historian, Dr. Victor Harland, who had a reputation for discrediting independent researchers like herself. If she uncovered something groundbreaking, he would not hesitate to challenge her findings and attempt to diminish her work. Margaret countered, adjusting her glasses. As Mia prepared for the journey ahead, Evelyn's letters tucked safely in her satchel, she pondered the promise that the mystery soldier had penned.
"What brings you to our little Bookhaven?"
"I'm tracing a personal history linked to World War II.
Mia explained, revealing the photograph and the soldier's obscure uniform. The archivist adjusted his spectacles and inspected the image with keen interest. It was an old routine for him, piecing together the past from forgotten fragments. Feel connected to her great-grandmother's legacy demanded boldness. She pressed send. That night, under the quiet canopy of a hotel room, Mia's thoughts drifted back to New York. Her life was there, yet it felt as if she were meant to be wandering these roads, led by letters and promises bound in time. She cradled the fading photograph as if to reaffirm the connection pieced together through generations. Her phone chimed softly, a new message. Mia's breath caught as she opened an email from Ethan Cole. He had replied, with an invitation to visit his home in Maine, offering his aid in her search, provided she respected certain boundaries and confidentiality. With dawn's first light, Mia's resolve only deepened. The journey northward was just beginning. Chapter 3: The Historian's Shadow. Mia's journey to Maine was filled with restless anticipation. The train ride north, carved through vast landscapes of autumn-drenched forests and picturesque towns, each station a pause in time, but her thoughts remained fixated on the letters and the elusive truth they concealed. Ethan Cole, a historian whose reclusive nature was matched only by his brilliance, had agreed to meet her. When she arrived at his secluded home, a sprawling, rustic house nestled between towering pines, she was greeted by an air of isolation. Ethan himself, a man in his late 40s with graying temples and weary eyes, opened the door with measured curiosity.
"You must be Mia Thompson," he said, stepping aside. "Come in."
His home was as she imagined, books stacked precariously on every available surface, faded maps pinned to the walls, and an overwhelming sense of a man lost in time. He led her to a study where a roaring fire cast flickering shadows along the bookshelves.
"I read your email," he said, settling into a worn leather chair. "You have something of interest?"
Mia carefully unfolded the letters, spreading them across the wooden desk. Ethan studied them in silence, his eyes scanning each line with a meticulous intensity. Minutes passed before he exhaled deeply and leaned back.
"These letters mention a regiment number," he murmured, tapping a faded ink signature. "It's British, not American. That's significant."
British? But my great-grandmother lived in New York.
"Which means the soldier wasn't stationed here," Ethan said. "He was either passing through or involved in something off the record."
The weight of his words sent a shiver through Mia.
Could it be classified military activity?
Ethan hesitated, his fingers drumming against the desk. "Possibly. I need to verify records from the era, but this connection suggests something far more complicated than a simple wartime romance."
Mia leaned forward, emboldened. I need to know more. Can you help me?
Before Ethan could answer, a sharp knock echoed through the house. He tensed, exchanging a wary glance with Mia before rising to answer the door. When he returned, his expression had darkened.
"That was Dr. Victor Harland," Ethan said, his voice low. "He knows you're here."
Notorious for discrediting independent researchers, was the last person she wanted interfering.
What does he want?
She asked.
"To stop you from finding the truth."
Ethan folded his arms. Chapter 4: The Trail of Secrets. Determined not to let Harland intimidate her, Mia spent the next several hours with Ethan combing through historical records. The soldier in the letters, it turned out, had been part of a secret British-American intelligence operation during World War II, one that was rarely documented. As they cross-referenced details, the threads of a hidden history began to weave together.
"If Harland's interested in this," Ethan said, "it means we're close to something important."
That night, as Mia lay awake in Ethan's guest room, she couldn't shake the feeling that her discovery was about more than just her family. It was about truth, justice, and the unrecorded sacrifices that shaped the nation. She had to see this through. The next morning, she and Ethan made a plan. They would visit a private archive in Boston that housed declassified intelligence files from World War II. It was their best chance to confirm the soldier's identity and his true role in history. But as Mia packed her satchel, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. When she answered, a chilling voice greeted her.
"You don't know what you're getting into, Miss Thompson. Walk away while you still can."
The line went dead. Mia's hands shook as she turned to Ethan.
They know we're looking.
Chapter 5: Unveiling the Past. Mia and Ethan exchanged uneasy glances. The ominous phone call confirmed their fears. Someone was watching, and their search for the truth had already made them a target.
Who do you think it was?
Mia asked, gripping her phone tightly.
Ethan exhaled, rubbing his chin. It could be Harland or someone connected to him, but it also means we're on the right track.
Determined to press forward, they departed for Boston early the next morning, traveling under the cover of a steady autumn drizzle. The private archive they sought was located in an unassuming brick building in Cambridge, tucked between university halls and libraries. Inside, a strict-faced archivist greeted them. "You're looking for World War II intelligence records?" she asked skeptically.
Mia nodded. British-American military operations, specifically in the 1940s, we have reference numbers.
The woman hesitated, eyeing them carefully before disappearing into the back room. When she returned, she carried a single locked file.
"You're lucky," she muttered. "This was recently declassified, but I need your IDs before you can view it."
Mia and Ethan handed over their credentials, and within moments the file was placed before them. The pages were yellowed, but the ink remained crisp. A single name leaped off the document: Lieutenant James Whitmore.
Mia's breath caught. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the name from the letters."
Mia's determination hardened.
"Neither am I."
She looked back at the files on the table. If Harland wanted to stop her this badly, then she had to move fast, before he erased the truth for good.
"We need to find out what happened to James Whitmore," she said, "and we need to do it now."
Chapter 7. The Race Against Time. Mia and Ethan wasted no time. As soon as Harland left, they knew they had only a short window before he made good on his threats. The archivist, still rattled from the encounter, hesitated before speaking.
"Listen," she said in a hushed voice. "I don't want trouble, but I believe history should be preserved. I can't let you take the file, but I didn't say you couldn't read it."
Mia met her eyes with gratitude.
"Thank you."
They pored over the remaining documents, piecing together Whitmore's movements before his disappearance. According to an intelligence report from early 1944, he had been investigating Nazi sympathizers embedded in American industries, particularly in New York. His last known assignment was to deliver a report to a high-ranking official, but the meeting never happened.
"It says here that Whitmore was last seen boarding a train to Washington, D.C., Ethan said, but there's no record of him arriving."
If he never made it, that means someone stopped him before he got there.
She scanned the document, and a particular name caught her eye.
"Colonel Richard Leland, the officer Whitmore was supposed to meet."
"We need to find out what happened to Leland," Mia said. "If he's still alive, he might have answers."
Ethan's expression darkened. Even if he's not, his records might.
Mia pulled out her phone and searched for any living relatives of Colonel Leland. Within moments, she found a promising lead. A Daniel Leland, listed as a retired professor of history in Washington, D.C.
"We have to go to D.C., she said. "He might be the key to unlocking what happened to Whitmore."
Ethan nodded. "Agreed, but we have to be careful. Harland won't stop just because we left Boston."
As they packed their things, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The archive had felt safe, but out there, in the open, anything could happen.
Before they left, the archivist placed a hand on Mia's shoulder. "Be careful," she whispered. "Some ghosts of the past don't want to be found."
Mia nodded, steeling herself.
"We're not stopping now."
The train ride to Washington, D.C. was tense. Mia sat by the window, watching the blurred landscape rush past, her mind racing just as fast. Across from her, Ethan was focused on his laptop, searching for any records on Colonel Richard Leland and his son Daniel.
"Leland was a decorated intelligence officer," Ethan muttered. "He worked closely with British and American operatives during the war. But after 1944 he was reassigned, no explanation given."
Mia frowned. "That's too convenient. If he was supposed to meet Whitmore and then suddenly got reassigned, someone was covering something up."
"And Daniel Leland? He's been a professor of military history for decades. If anyone knows what happened to his father, it's him."
When they arrived in Washington, the atmosphere felt heavy. Mia couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on them, though she saw nothing suspicious. They took a cab to Daniel Leland's home, a modest colonial house in a quiet neighborhood.
Mia hesitated before knocking. "What if he won't talk?"
Ethan smirked. "Then we ask in a way he can't ignore."
Mia knocked, and after a long pause, the door creaked open. A man in his 70s, with piercing blue eyes and neatly combed silver hair, studied them.
"Dr. Leland," Mia asked.
He hesitated.
"Depends on who's asking."
Mia pulled out the photograph of James Whitmore. "We're researching this man. Your father was supposed to meet him in 1944, but Whitmore vanished before that could happen. We think your father knew why.
Daniel Leland's expression darkened. He glanced up and down the street, then stepped aside.
"Come in," he said, "and lock the door behind you."
Mia and Ethan exchanged a wary glance, but did as they were told. Inside, the house was filled with books, maps, and framed war medals. Leland led them into his study and sat down, his gaze heavy with the weight of memory.
"I was just a boy when my father disappeared," he began. "They told me it was an accident, but I always knew better."
Mia leaned forward. Disappeared?
Daniel nodded. 3 months after Whitmore went missing, my father did too. Official records say his car went off the road on a stormy night. No body was ever recovered.
A chill ran down Mia's spine. Do you think he was killed?
Daniel exhaled slowly. "I think my father knew something that got him and Whitmore silenced."
Ethan placed a document on the table.
"Whitmore was investigating Nazi sympathizers in America. Do you think your father was helping him?"
Leland nodded grimly.
Mia's mind spun. Who would want them dead?
Daniel's eyes met hers. "The same people who don't want you digging now."
The words sent a shiver through her. Before she could respond, a sudden noise outside made them all freeze. A car door slammed shut. Heavy footsteps approached the front door.
Daniel stood quickly. "You need to go now."
But Mia started.
"No time. There's a back door. Use it."
Ethan grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward the back exit, just as the front door was pounded on.
"Dr. Leland, open up," a voice demanded.
Mia and Ethan moved swiftly through the dark alley behind Daniel Leland's house, their hearts pounding in unison. The distant voices at the front door grew sharper, more demanding.
Who are they? Mia whispered as they hurried past a row of hedges.
Ethan shook his head. "I don't know, but I guarantee they aren't here for tea."
A sudden burst of shouting came from inside the house.
"Where are they? They were just here!"
Mia's stomach twisted. They know we're gone.
Ethan tightened his grip on her wrist. "We have to get off the street."
Spotting an open gate leading to another neighborhood, they slipped through just as the front door of Leland's house slammed open. They ducked behind a parked truck, watching as two dark-suited men stepped onto the porch. One of them scanned the street, while the other muttered into a phone.
"They've got backup," Ethan murmured.
Mia's pulse quickened. We need a way out, fast.
They moved quickly through the unfamiliar neighborhood, staying in the shadows until they reached a main road. Just as Mia was about to suggest calling for a rideshare, Ethan pointed to a small diner across the street.
"Let's go inside, blend in."
The bell above the diner door jingled as they entered. The warm scent of coffee and grilled food filled the air. A handful of patrons glanced up, but quickly returned to their meals. Mia and Ethan slid into a booth at the back. A waitress approached, pen poised over a notepad.
What can I get you folks? Mia forced a smile. Just coffee, please.
As the waitress walked away, Ethan pulled out his phone and tapped furiously.
"I'm trying to see if Leland has any other family, someone we can reach out to."
Mia glanced out the window. The men in suits were now across the street, scanning the area.
Her stomach churned. They're looking for us.
Ethan put his phone down. "We need to get out of D.C. Leland was right. Whoever silenced Whitmore and his father is still trying to bury the truth."
Mia nodded. We have to find proof before they do.
Just as she spoke, a low chime from Ethan's phone caught their attention. He checked the screen, and his eyes widened.
"I found something."
Mia leaned closer. What is it?
Ethan turned the phone toward her. "Leland's father had a hidden safe deposit box. It was registered under a false name, and it's still active."
Mia's breath hitched. Where is it?
Ethan looked up, back where this all started.
Mia clenched her fists. Then we go home.
Before Ethan could respond, the bell above the diner door jingled again. Maya's breath caught as she saw one of the suited men step inside. His eyes scanned the room.
"We've been found," Ethan muttered. "Act natural."
Mia tightened her grip around the coffee cup, trying to steady her shaking hands as the suited man approached. Ethan, seated across from her, maintained a calm expression, but she could see the tension in his clenched jaw. The man stopped at their booth.
"Miss Thompson, Mr. Cole."
His voice was smooth, calculated.
"We need to have a word."
Mia forced a smile. I think you have the wrong people.
The man smirked.
"Let's not play games. You've been asking the wrong questions about the wrong people. That's dangerous."
Ethan leaned back, his hands resting casually on the table.
"Is it illegal to ask questions about history?"
The man's eyes darkened.
"History is written by those who control it. And you two? You're looking for something that was meant to stay buried.
Mia's pulse hammered. Why do you care so much about an old intelligence officer?
The man tilted his head.
It's not about Whitmore. It's about what he knew.
He leaned forward, lowering his voice.
Walk away now, and you'll live to chase another story.
Ethan exchanged a glance with Mia. They weren't backing down. Mia set her cup down carefully.
We're done here.
The man's smirk vanished.
I hope, for your sake, that's true.
He stood and walked out of the diner. Mia exhaled sharply, realizing she had been holding her breath. We need to go, Ethan said, already reaching for his phone. Now. Mia grabbed her bag, throwing cash on the table before they slipped out the back door of the diner. Outside, the cool air hit her skin, but it did little to calm her racing heart.
Do you think they'll follow us? She asked.
Ethan scanned the area, without a doubt, but we're not going to make it easy for them.
They hailed a cab, directing the driver to a random location several blocks away. Once inside, Ethan pulled out his phone again.
We need to get to New York fast. That deposit box could have everything we need.
Mia nodded. If Whitmore and Leland were silenced because of what they knew, then whatever's in that box might explain everything.
The cab turned onto a busier street, but as Mia glanced out the window, her stomach dropped. A black SUV was 2 cars behind them.
They're following us, she whispered.
Ethan didn't turn around.
Instead, he leaned forward to the driver. Change of plans. Take a left here, then another left after 2 blocks.
The driver frowned but complied. The SUV followed.
Mia's heartbeat quickened. They're not letting us go.
Ethan pulled out his wallet, handing a few extra bills to the driver.
Lose them.
The cab driver nodded and took an abrupt right, weaving through side streets. The SUV hesitated before following, but the driver made another quick turn onto a one-way alley, then another sharp right. Mia turned back. The SUV was gone.
She exhaled. That was close.
Ethan nodded. Too close. We need to get to the train station and out of here before they find us again.
Mia and Ethan rushed into the train station, their eyes darting around for any sign of their pursuers. The Grand Hall was bustling with commuters, a constant flow of people moving in and out of the city. It was the perfect place to disappear, if they moved fast enough. Ethan led the way to the ticket counter.
2 tickets to New York, earliest train out?
The agent barely glanced at them as she punched in the request.
Next departure is in 10 minutes, track 7.
Mia exhaled with relief as Ethan slid the cash across the counter. The moment they got their tickets, they turned away, blending into the crowd.
We can't stay in one place too long. If they're here, they'll be watching the exits.
Mia nodded, glancing over her shoulder. Her stomach tightened as she spotted a familiar black suit standing near the arrivals board. The man from the diner. He was scanning the crowd, his gaze sharp, calculating. He's here, she whispered.
Then we move now.
They weaved through groups of travelers, keeping their heads down. Every step toward track 7 felt agonizingly slow.
Mia's heart pounded. What if they try to stop us before we board?
Ethan's eyes flickered toward a group of uniformed security officers patrolling the area.
Then we make a scene. They can't risk exposure in a public place.
Mia gritted her teeth. I'd rather not test that theory.
They reached the escalator leading down to track 7. Just as they stepped on, she caught a glimpse of the suited man moving quickly in their direction. He had seen them.
He's coming, Mia breathed.
Ethan stayed calm. We don't run, we just board.
The moment they reached the platform, the train doors were already open, passengers shuffling inside. They stepped in just as the final boarding call echoed over the speakers. Mia grabbed an empty seat by the window, watching as the man from the diner reached the platform. He stopped just short of the train, locking eyes with her as the doors slid shut. For a second, she thought he might force his way on. But instead, he pulled out a phone and spoke into it, his gaze never leaving hers. As the train began to pull away, Ethan exhaled.
We made it.
Mia wasn't convinced, for now.
She turned her gaze forward. The ride to New York would take a few hours, but it wasn't time to relax. Not yet. Because whatever waited for them in that deposit box, whatever Whitmore and Leland had risked their lives to protect, was going to change everything. Chapter 12, The Vault of Secrets. The train rumbled along the tracks, carrying Mia and Ethan toward the heart of New York. The rhythmic sway of the carriage should have been calming, but Mia's nerves were electric. She knew they were being hunted. Ethan pulled out his laptop and began scanning old banking records.
Leland's deposit box is registered to a small private bank in Manhattan. The records show it's been dormant for decades.
Mia frowned. Then why is it still active?
Ethan tapped his screen. Someone has been paying the maintenance fees. Anonymously.
Mia's stomach churned. Someone doesn't want it forgotten.
As they neared Penn Station, Ethan shut the laptop.
We get in, retrieve whatever's in that box, and disappear. We can't assume we're safe.
Mia nodded, her grip tightening around the strap of her bag. Then let's move fast.
The bank was an old stone building tucked between towering modern offices. A brass plaque by the door read Hudson Trust Bank, established 1923. Inside, a woman with wire-rimmed glasses and a professional smile greeted them.
How can I help you today?
Ethan stepped forward, producing a small slip of paper with the deposit box number.
We need access to this box. We're acting on behalf of the Leland estate.
The woman studied the number, then glanced up.
I see. Do you have the key?
Mia hesitated. They had no key.
It's been misplaced, Ethan said smoothly. Is there another way to access it?
The woman sighed, then nodded.
We can confirm ownership through a security check. Follow me.
She led them through a side door into a vault area lined with private boxes. At the end of the corridor stood a thick, reinforced steel door. The woman pressed a button on the wall, and the door slid open with a quiet hiss. Inside, rows of locked boxes lined the walls. The woman found the right one and turned to them.
Fingerprint verification is required, she said. If you're the legal successor, you should be able to open it.
Mia's pulse quickened. She hadn't prepared for this, but if Leland had left the box for someone like her, someone searching for the truth, maybe, just maybe, he had made it accessible. Tentatively, she placed her fingertip on the scanner. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft click, the box unlocked. Mia exchanged a stunned glance with Ethan.
That means he expected someone like me to come looking.
The bank clerk nodded.
I'll give you privacy to review the contents.
She stepped out, closing the vault door behind her. Mia reached inside the box and pulled out a single, weathered envelope. She unfolded it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter, written in elegant, fading script. Ethan leaned over her shoulder as she read aloud.
If you are reading this, then history has found its way back to you. What James Whitmore and I uncovered in 1944 was too dangerous to reveal then. But perhaps now the world is ready for the truth. Inside this envelope, you will find the proof that men in power never wanted the world to see.
Mia reached deeper into the box and pulled out another small folded document. When she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. It was a top-secret wartime agreement, signed by several US and British officials. The words, Operation Midnight, was stamped across the top. Ethan exhaled sharply.
What the hell is this?
Mia's hands shook as she scanned the text.
It's proof of a secret deal between Allied forces and high-ranking Nazi officers, a deal that allowed some of them to escape prosecution in exchange for intelligence.
Ethan's face darkened.
This means some of the worst war criminals weren't just let go. They were protected.
Mia's stomach churned.
And Whitmore must have found out. That's why he was silenced.
Before Ethan could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the vault. Mia's blood ran cold. They weren't alone. Chapter 13. A Betrayal in the Vault. Mia's breath hitched as the footsteps outside the vault grew louder. Someone was coming. Ethan quickly tucked the documents back into the envelope and stuffed it inside his jacket.
We need to leave.
The heavy steel door to the vault swung open. Two men in dark suits stepped inside, their expressions cold and unreadable. Behind them, to Mia's horror, stood Dr. Victor Harland.
I knew you wouldn't let it go,
Harland said, shaking his head.
Curiosity always gets the best of you, doesn't it, Mia?
Mia clenched her fists.
You knew about this all along.
Harland's smirk deepened.
Of course. I knew about Whitmore, about Leland, and I knew someone would come looking eventually. But I didn't expect it to be you.
Ethan stepped protectively in front of Mia.
You're trying to bury this, aren't you? The truth about Operation Midnight. The proof that the US and Britain allowed Nazi officers to walk free in exchange for intelligence.
Harland sighed.
And what would you do with that knowledge, Ethan? Publish it? Create a scandal? The world has moved on. This is history now, long past the point where justice is possible.
Mia's jaw tightened.
You're wrong. The truth matters. People deserve to know what really happened.
Harland gestured toward the envelope tucked inside Ethan's jacket.
That document is dangerous. There are powerful people who would rather see it destroyed than let it surface.
Ethan shook his head.
And I assume you work for them?
Harland gave a slow, deliberate nod.
I work for stability, for order. Exposing this won't change the past, but it will unravel trust in governments, in history itself.
Mia's heart pounded.
So what happens now? Are you going to kill us?
Harland sighed, as if the thought annoyed him.
I'd rather not. I was hoping you'd be reasonable, but if you refuse to cooperate, then yes, there are other ways to ensure this stays buried.
The two men behind him shifted, their intent clear. Ethan's voice was low.
Mia, when I say run, you run.
Harland smiled.
Where would you run, Ethan? We have every exit covered.
Ethan took a slow step forward, his hands raised.
You should know something, Harland.
Harland raised a brow.
And what's that?
Ethan suddenly threw a punch, catching Harland square in the jaw. The older man stumbled backward, cursing, and in the split second of confusion, Ethan grabbed Mia's wrist.
Run!
Mia bolted, sprinting toward the door. The two suited men lunged after them, but Ethan knocked over a metal cart, sending files and papers scattering across the floor. They raced through the bank corridors, weaving between startled employees. Behind them, shouts echoed as Harland's men pursued them. Mia's lungs burned as she pushed through the main doors and out onto the street. Ethan was right behind her.
We need to disappear.
Mia spotted a subway entrance.
Down here.
They darted into the station, swiping a stolen Metro card and slipping through the turnstiles. Just as they heard footsteps behind them, a train pulled up.
Jump!
Ethan shouted. They threw themselves onto the train just as the doors slid shut. Mia turned, breathless, as she saw one of Harland's men reach the platform, too late. The train sped into the tunnel, carrying them to safety. Ethan leaned against the wall, exhaling sharply.
That was too close.
Mia pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady her heartbeat.
We have the document, but Harland isn't going to stop.
Ethan's expression was grim.
Then we need a plan fast.
Mia swallowed hard. They had the proof. But exposing it, that would be the most dangerous part yet. Chapter 14. The Final Move. The subway car rattled as it sped through the underground tunnels of Manhattan, dim fluorescent lights flickering above them. Mia's hands trembled as she clutched the metal pole, her mind racing. They had barely escaped, and now Harland and his men would be scouring the city for them. Ethan leaned in close, his voice low.
We can't run forever. We have to make our move.
Mia nodded.
But how? Harland has connections. If we try to leak this document the usual way, it'll disappear before it even reaches the public.
Ethan's eyes darkened.
Then we go straight to the people.
Mia frowned.
What do you mean?
Ethan pulled out his phone.
A live stream. If we broadcast the truth in real time, Harland can't stop it.
Mia hesitated.
That's risky. They'll come after us the second we go live.
Ethan smirked.
They already are.
She exhaled sharply, knowing he was right.
Where do we do it?
Ethan checked his watch.
We need a secure place with a good signal. I know someone who can help.
Mia followed him off the train at the next stop. They navigated through the crowded station, taking side streets until they arrived at a nondescript brick building in Brooklyn. Ethan knocked twice on a metal door. A slot slid open, revealing a pair of sharp, scrutinizing eyes.
Who the hell is this?
It's Ethan. We need your setup now. The door creaked open, and a scruffy man in a hoodie stepped back.
Damn, Cole, you look like you're in some serious trouble.
Ethan nodded.
We are, Jake. That's why we need your tech.
Jake led them inside to a cluttered apartment, filled with monitors, cables, and cameras.
You're going live?
Jake asked, raising a brow. Ethan nodded.
And we need to do it fast.
Mia sat down in front of the camera, her hands still shaking as Ethan positioned the document on the desk in front of her.
This is it,
Ethan said softly.
Once we start, there's no turning back.
Mia inhaled deeply, steadying herself.
Let's do it.
Jake pressed a button, and the live stream began. Mia looked directly into the camera.
My name is Mia Thompson, and what I'm about to show you will change history.
She held up the document, her voice strong despite the fear clawing at her.
This is proof that during World War II, high-ranking Nazi officers were secretly allowed to escape prosecution in exchange for intelligence. It was called Operation Midnight, and our governments covered it up for decades.
Ethan switched the feed to a close-up of the document, revealing the signatures of powerful figures.
These signatures confirm the conspiracy. And there are more records, files that have been hidden for nearly 80 years.
Mia's heart pounded as comments flooded in. Who is trying to stop you? Is this real? Why haven't we heard of this before? And then the screen flickered.
Jake cursed. They're trying to shut us down.
Ethan typed furiously.
We need to mirror the stream, send it to different platforms.
Suddenly, a loud bang echoed outside. Mia's breath hitched.
They're here.
Jake's eyes widened.
You need to go now.
Ethan grabbed the hard drive with the files, shoving it into his jacket.
Mia?
They bolted for the back exit, just as the front door burst open. Shouts filled the air as Harlan's men stormed in. Mia and Ethan sprinted down the alley, sirens wailing in the distance. Mia's phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number.
You can't stop the truth. The world is watching.
She didn't know who had sent it, but she knew one thing. The truth was out, and there was no going back. Chapter 15. The Truth Unleashed. Mia and Ethan ran through the dimly lit streets of Brooklyn, their breaths ragged, their hearts pounding. Behind them, shouts rang out as Harlan's men scrambled to regain control. But it was too late. The livestream had gone viral. Ethan's phone buzzed with notifications. News agencies, independent journalists, and whistleblower groups were already picking up the broadcast. The truth was out, spreading faster than Harlan could suppress it. Mia glanced over her shoulder.
Where do we go now?
Ethan pulled her into a dark alley, pressing them against the cold brick wall.
We don't stop moving. Not until we're sure they can't touch us.
The night was alive with the hum of sirens and the distant chatter of the city, but something had changed. The weight that had been pressing down on them since this journey began was lifting. Mia's phone vibrated in her pocket. She hesitated before pulling it out. You did it. Her hands trembled. She turned the screen to Ethan.
Do you think it's Harlan?
Ethan shook his head.
No, if it were him, we'd be dead.
Mia's phone buzzed again. Another message. The world is listening now. Stay safe. Ethan exhaled, rubbing his hands over his face.
Whoever that is, they're right. The truth is out. We did our part.
Mia looked up at the skyline, the towering lights of Manhattan standing against the dark horizon. She had spent so much of her life chasing history, but tonight she had become part of it.
What now?
She asked. Ethan smirked.
Now we disappear.
Mia nodded. They had exposed a cover-up that had lasted nearly a century, but their fight wasn't over. Harlan and his allies would still be looking for them, desperate to reclaim control. But it was too late. The world had seen the truth, and there was no going back. Epilogue: The Legacy of Truth. Months later, the fallout from Operation Midnight continued to shake the highest levels of government. Investigations had begun, former officials were being questioned, and the world was demanding answers. Mia sat in a quiet cafe in Prague, a place where no one knew her name. Across from her, Ethan scrolled through the latest headlines.
More files have been leaked.
He murmured.
Other historians are picking up where we left off.
Mia sipped her coffee, the tension that had gripped her for so long finally easing. They had done what they came to do. The past had finally been brought into the light. And no matter what happened next, the truth was no longer theirs to protect. It belonged to the world. The end.